and then to Joe Biden in 2020. Trump won Michigan by 10,000 votes. 4 years later, Joe Biden won Michigan by 154,000 votes. In the president's opening line today at a Ford plant in the home state of the American auto industry, the president showed the rhetorical touch that won him a clear majority of Michigan voters.
My name is Joe Biden, and I'm a car guy.
A car guy indeed. Michigan Congresswoman Debbie Dingell was with the president today when he delivered that speech in Dearborn in her congressional district. She will join us in a moment. Tomorrow, Congresswoman Dingell will be voting on a House bill to create a 9/11-style bipartisan commission to investigate the attack on the Capitol on January 6th by a Trump mob after Donald Trump urged them to go to the Capitol and fight, fight, fight. It's a bipartisan compromise bill created by Democrats and Republicans on the House Homeland Security Committee. Today, the House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said he is now opposed to that bipartisan compromise bill. And the House Minority Whip, Steve Scalise, is now urging Republican House members to vote against the January 6th investigative commission. Here's what House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told NBC's Garrett Haake about the legislation.
I'm very pleased that we have a bipartisan bill come to the floor, and it's disappointing but not surprising that the cowardice on the part of some on the Republican side not to want to find the truth.
Another member of the House Democratic leadership, New York Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, said this.
It's hard to take Kevin McCarthy seriously at this point. I don't know what Kevin McCarthy is afraid of.
Well, Kevin McCarthy could be afraid of being subpoenaed to testify under oath to that commission about what he said to Donald Trump on the phone and what Donald Trump said to him on the phone while Kevin McCarthy was in hiding in an undisclosed location during the attack on the Capitol. Here's what Kevin McCarthy said on the floor of the House of Representatives after his phone conversations with Donald Trump during the attack on the Capitol.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by President Trump.
After that, Kevin McCarthy immediately stopped saying unkind things about Donald Trump and is now in the midst of expelling Republicans from the House leadership who say anything unkind about Donald Trump. Speaking of Liz Cheney, on Sunday, she said that Kevin McCarthy should testify under oath to the January 6th commission.
He absolutely should, and I wouldn't be surprised if he were subpoenaed. I think that he very clearly and said publicly that he's got information about the president's state of mind that day.
In the early days after January 6th, Kevin McCarthy privately told Republican members of the House that when he was on the telephone with Donald Trump, begging Donald Trump to make a public statement telling his supporters to leave the Capitol, Donald Trump said, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." One of the people who was more upset about the election than Kevin McCarthy is Jacob Chansley, who entered Kevin McCarthy's workplace on January 6th, dressed like this. In an interview with Talking Points Memo, Jacob Chansley's attorney told reporter Matt Schuman that Jacob Chansley was more than upset. In the first line of his quote to Matt Schuman, the lawyer said, "I'm going to use this colloquial term, perhaps disrespectfully, about a lot of these defendants." The lawyer then went on to deliver a richly profane statement about the mental health of his client and others who attacked the Capitol. Some of the words that I can say on TV in the lawyer's quote are, "These are people with brain damage. They were subjected to 4+ years of goddamn propaganda, the likes of which the world has not seen since effing Hitler." Today, on the day the president visited Michigan, a court in Michigan dismissed the final election fraud case in the state brought by a voter who believed that there should be an audit of the presidential vote. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson said the dismissal of the last of the lawsuits attempting to undermine democracy in furtherance of the big lie affirms that despite intense scrutiny and an unprecedented misinformation campaign, the 2020 election was fair and secure, and the results accurately reflect the will of the voters. Today in Dearborn, Michigan, the president, elected by the voters of Michigan, toured the Ford Electric Vehicle Center, where President Biden test drove Ford's new electric pickup truck, the F-150, and he spoke about the future of auto workers and promised them, "We will leave no one behind."
We're at a great inflection point in American history. How we handle the next 4 to 10 years is going to determine where we're going to be 30, 40, 50 years from now. It's one of those moments in American history. The future of the auto industry is electric. There's no turning back. We're going to put Americans to work modernizing our roads, our highways, our ports, our airports, rails, and transit systems. That includes putting IBEW members and the union workers to work installing 50,000 charging stations along our roads and highways, our homes and our apartments. The IBEW is ready to do it, and they can. Now, I know many of you watching at home are like the folks I grew up with in Scranton and Claymont, Delaware. They feel left out, left behind in an economy and an industry that's rapidly changing. I understand it. I really do. But we will leave no one behind.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell was with the president during that speech. Congresswoman Dingell's late husband, John Dingell, was the longest serving member of the House in history when he passed away in 2019 after 59 years of serving in the House, decades of which overlapped with Joe Biden's service in the United States Senate.
Representative Debbie Dingell, another dear friend. I know John's looking down and he's saying, we're finally getting it done, huh? We're getting it done.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell of Michigan. She is the senior Democratic whip. Congresswoman Dingell, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to begin with the January 6th commission that you'll be voting on tomorrow. I imagine you're having no challenges as a whip getting Democrats on board. But what are you expecting tomorrow now that the Republican leadership has turned against this bill?
So, Lawrence, I've talked to a lot of my Republican colleagues, several of them from Michigan, others in the Problem Solvers, and others in Tuesday Group. Now, I was with the president today, so I wasn't on the House floor, but as of last night, there were a significant number, at least a couple dozen, if not more, that are going to vote for this commission. And, when people say it didn't happen or these were visitors to the Capitol, the American people watched what happened on January 6th. In fact, I was on the House floor. I at first didn't understand what was happening up there. I thought I was safe. The American people saw what was happening to their symbol of democracy before people like I did. So to say that this didn't happen, it's just simply impossible to understand. And we all need to worry about the fear and the hatred that's divided this country, that has enabled people like that to come to our Capitol, and understand how it happened.
It's Kevin McCarthy who wants to block this investigation, is watching professional prosecutors around the country from Georgia to New York close in on Donald Trump, something we've never seen from with a previous president and being investigated this way criminally. And tonight's news that the New York State Attorney General is teaming up with the Manhattan District Attorney to join in a criminal investigation of Donald Trump's businesses, while Kevin McCarthy is trying to protect Donald Trump from an investigation of what he did on January 6th. It seems that Kevin McCarthy, countrywide anyway, is fighting a losing battle against the concept of investigating Donald Trump.
I quite frankly, I don't understand how or why some of the things that are happening right now, because we see it in front of our eyes. I want to put the last 4 years behind us, because I think this nation needs to heal. I think we have a lot of problems that we've got to come together on and reach across the aisle. And people that, have been pitted against each other for the last 4 years need to start working together. But so that the fact that an attorney general would undertake a criminal investigation against the former president, that is a very significant development. And there must be very disturbing evidence that has something like that happening. I don't think this, by the way, I think people need to be held accountable. But I also think this nation's got a lot of work to do, and we got to find a way that stop. I want to stop this fear, this hatred, this continuing division that is hurting the fundamental pillars of our democracy. And what's going on right now contributes to it. It's not helpful.
Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, thank you very much for leading us off tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And joining our discussion now is Andrew Weissman, former federal prosecutor. He served as FBI General Counsel and Chief of the Criminal Division in the Eastern District of New York. He is an MSNBC legal analyst. Andrew, I want to get your reading of this legal development tonight for Donald Trump. Here you have the New York State Attorney General teaming up, in effect, with the Manhattan District Attorney, sharing resources, sharing information in a criminal investigation of Donald Trump's businesses?
Yeah, so I think something that's important to note is that the New York Attorney General generally only has civil authority with one important exception, and that is something called the Martin Act. Viewers may remember that Eliot Spitzer, when he was the New York Attorney General, used the Martin Act a lot. People think that the Martin Act only covers securities and commodities fraud, that is, fraud or deceit in the sale or purchase of securities or commodities, but it also has a provision that covers fraud or deceit in the sale of real estate, that is, co-ops or condominiums in New York State. So we don't know exactly what they're being looked at, but if you narrow it down to, what does the New York Attorney General have criminal jurisdiction over? It's the Martin Act. And if you look at the provisions of the Martin Act, which are securities, commodities, and real estate, it seems if you connect the dots, that must be what Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, has now in her sights in connection with the Trump investigation.
And when you think about the pattern and practices of the Trump organization, they already lost a real estate fraud case in California where they defrauded people who were buying condos in a so-called Trump development in California. That happened during the 2016 presidential campaign, where all of those people who were defrauded by the Trump operation were coming forward, going public. So it's not like this business is unfamiliar about where the lines are on criminal fraud in real estate.
Sure. Well, as an inveterate New Yorker, until a little while ago, you could see the Trump name, plastered all over hotels and other residences that he had and developed across the city. Many of those have been taken down in light of people's reactions to the presidency. But you can imagine the Attorney General looking at any and all representations that were made by the Trump organization in connection with those real estate deals.
And so in a situation like that, I guess from this distance, it's hard to say who personally has legal liability for those representations. And I guess that would depend on the evidence base.
Absolutely. This is, just because there's an investigation, it doesn't mean that there's going to be liability. And it certainly doesn't mean that even if there's going to be liability, that it's going to go all the way to the top. That being said, it is important to remember that the Trump organization is small, and that Donald Trump is a notorious micromanager. So, if there's something there, somebody is going to take the fall for that. And, I would suspect that Letitia James, like the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, is going to be upping the pressure on people like Weisselberg to cooperate with the investigation.
So does the partnership now, prosecutorial partnership with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office by the State Attorney General, indicate that what the State Attorney General is investigating occurred in Manhattan?
Well, it certainly occurred in New York State. That is something that, at least in part, it has to have occurred here for there to be jurisdiction. But just remember, this is where the Trump organization is. So that makes a lot of sense. It's not like this investigation is being brought in Nebraska. This is really the ground zero for where you would expect a investigation to be into Trump as a businessman to be housed here.
What is the likelihood that Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers already knew about this partnership in this prosecution?
That's a good question. I don't know that they would know that. This could be something that's taking them somewhat by surprise. We just don't have a lot of insight into the communications that have been going on with the state, and that speaks well of the state that they are keeping their investigation under wraps, and will only unveil it if and when there are charges. But it is a little surprising that we haven't heard anything from the defense lawyers, because if you look at the Rudy Giuliani situation, there you have the defense lawyers taking a very different tack of trying to make everything public and thinking that the best defense is a good offense.
The statement that we at MSNBC have now confirmed is that it says, we have informed the Trump organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity, along with the Manhattan DA. Was the state attorney general under any obligation to tell the Trump organization about this change?
No, and that's a great question. I would suspect that the reason for that is, again, increasing the pressure on witnesses to cooperate. You know, it's one thing if you face civil liability, and that's merely a question of money. And for people in the Trump organization, you know, there are ways to take care of that liability. But criminal exposure is, you know, a completely, you know, different game. You know, there's no way to buy your way out of jail.
Andrew Weissman, we were not planning a segment on defendant Trump tonight, but thank you very much for jumping in and covering this for us. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We'll be staying on this breaking news. Coming up, David Plouffe will join us with his reaction. And we have breaking news at this hour from the New York State Attorney General, who issued this statement just minutes ago. We have informed the Trump organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity, along with the Manhattan District Attorney. We have no additional comment at this time. For additional comment, we are joined now by David Plouffe, former campaign manager and White House senior advisor to President Barack Obama. He is an MSNBC political analyst. And David, this is news unlike any we have ever heard about any previous president before or after serving in the presidency. Here you have the New York State Attorney General teaming up with the Manhattan District Attorney, clearly because the Trump organization is located in Manhattan. Manhattan District Attorney already running a criminal investigation of the Trump business using a grand jury. They are now going to share information. And so the New York Attorney General will be able to obtain, conceivably, information that has been gathered by this pre-existing criminal grand jury. This is not a politics question. This is a how do you face this? Donald Trump pretending to spend his day concerned with what Republican members of the House might be saying about him. The truth of his life is, this is what occupies his day, worrying about the next thing his criminal defense attorneys are going to tell him.
Yeah, Lawrence, there's no doubt about that. I've long maintained, even though Donald Trump sought the presidency and won the presidency, not many people have done that, I think he's going to regret entering the presidential race, much less winning it, because I think this is just the beginning of the end, potentially. The rest of his days on this earth are going to be faced with dealing with investigations, and perhaps it gets more serious than that. Now, the question politically, I agree this is about the law, not about politics. Will this at all shake the Republican obsession with their cult leader? My guess is not. They've stuck by him through thick and thin as he's tried to shred the Constitution and led a very immoral life. But he's in deep trouble. And I think that this is probably just the beginning. And so, yeah, he can send out ridiculous statements about Arizona ballot equipment, and he can, applaud them for getting rid of Cheney. But at the end of the day, this has to occupy his time. And, my sense is it's probably a business that's not doing that well. So he's got a struggling business, and he's got deep legal exposure. So it couldn't happen to a better guy as far as I'm concerned.
David, as I was saying to Rachel at the beginning of the hour, the thing that has made me just sit out any pundit discussions about Donald Trump's political power and his political power going forward is I've always thought, well, you have to tell me whether we're talking about a convicted criminal or a current criminal defendant in a pending criminal case when we're talking about this character, Donald Trump, the politician. He now has three criminal investigations against him right now. One in Georgia, two in New York. Now, what are the odds? What are the odds that Donald Trump gets lucky on all three? If you know the answer to that, you know the answer to his political future.
Right, but I think the question is, there's two really questions that are like, well, obviously there's a question of does he run again and seek the presidency? I've got real doubts about that. But is he somebody who can be helpful with swing voters in 22, or is he going to hurt the Republican Party? And then, of course, the bigger question is, right now, he is a cult leader. He is astride the Republican Party. They all bow down to him. They follow him down whatever road he sets out, the big lie being the biggest problem we face right now. And so my guess is this won't shake their allegiance to him at all. You saw some local Arizona elected officials begin to speak out. There's been a handful of people in Congress. What I don't understand about this, Lawrence, is, if they all decided to say, you know what, we think he did a good job on some issues, but we're done with the big lie. Like the sun would come up tomorrow. They're like basically held hostage by him. And I think he's a paper tiger at the end of the day. But this won't shake the allegiance of most Republican elected officials and maybe most Republican voters, until there's some more stones to be turned down the road.
So let's talk about one of the cult members, Marco Rubio, who ran against Donald Trump for president, calling him a con man nonstop for a while there. And then when he lost to Donald Trump in the primaries, he kind of immediately joined the cult. Val Demings is now on the verge of announcing that she's going to run against Marco Rubio in Florida. So you could have a Senate campaign in Florida next year where cult member Marco Rubio has to defend Donald Trump every day on the campaign trail for the latest twist and turn in a criminal prosecution of Donald Trump, while Val Demings, a former law enforcement official herself, is out there campaigning against the kind of crime and corruption that Donald Trump represents, and campaigning positively for Senate, as Marco Rubio has the job of defending Donald Trump.
Yeah, grab the popcorn, Lawrence. So you're a Democrat, or I would say, even if you're not a Democrat, you're a Republican who believes in democracy versus autocracy and realizes Democrats have to hold the Senate and the House. This is extraordinarily important news. So first of all, Marco Rubio seems afraid of everything. Val Demings seems like she's afraid of nothing. So I think there's a real contrast in terms of strength and character. But listen, there's a belief that is Florida gone for the Democratic Party. Listen, Obama wins it, narrowly in 12. Hillary loses it narrowly in 16. Gillum and Nelson lose it by a whisker in 18. Trump opened up a few point win in 20. But Florida, with the right candidate and the right excitement and the right organization, is a winning state. And you have to look at the Senate picture in totality. The Democratic Party, in my view, this isn't just about maintaining control in 2022, as important as it is. The 2024 cycle in the Senate races is really brutal for the Democrats. You've got Joe Manchin's seat, you've got John Tester's seat. We're not playing that much offense. Maybe we're going to mount a campaign against Cruz in a presidential year. Maybe Rick Scott. So you have to maximize in Wisconsin this cycle, in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania. You've got to protect Warnock and Kelly, and those could both be tough races. And you've got to have some states like Florida. And I remind people that this time in the 2020 cycle, there were very few people in politics, in either party, who thought that either Georgia race would be super competitive. And obviously they ended up determining the president, the Senate control. So Florida is really important. I think Val Demings can put it in play, and you have to have as many shots on goal as possible, so you don't have to win them all, not just to retain the majority. But again, I think the Democratic Party has to exit 22 with some room to spare, because you could give up some of that ground in 24.
David Plouffe, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Lawrence.
And up next, we're going to have more on the breaking news tonight that the New York State Attorney General's office is now investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal investigation. Tim O'Brien, expert on the Trump businesses, will join us next. The breaking news of this hour is a statement from the New York Attorney General that MSNBC received 45 minutes ago. New York Attorney General Letitia James issued this written statement saying, "We have informed the Trump Organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We are now actively investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity, along with the Manhattan District Attorney. We have no additional comment at this time." Tim O'Brien is a senior columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. He is the author of the book Trump Nation. Tim O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us for this breaking news tonight. You wrote a book about Donald Trump's businesses. Donald Trump sued you because you said he was not a billionaire. Donald Trump lost that lawsuit against you because Donald Trump is not a billionaire. No one outside of the Trump Organization knows more about the Trump businesses than you do. What is your reaction tonight to this publicly announced teamwork now in a criminal investigation of the Trump businesses by the New York State Attorney General and the Manhattan District Attorney?
This dramatically ups the legal pressure on Trump, on Alan Weisselberg, and on the entire Trump Organization, Lawrence. Up until now, Cy Vance's investigation of Trump was the more consequential of the two relative to Tish James's investigation. She's the New York Attorney General, because he had a criminal probe in motion, and a criminal probe potentially carries a prison sentence with it. A civil probe, usually at its worst, just can result in a massive fine. The fact that the New York AG has decided to convert her case from a civil probe into a criminal prosecution suggests that she has evidence of criminal intent. That is the standard in a criminal case, that the defendant knew that he or she was doing something wrong and had criminal intent behind it. And that is a very difficult and challenging standard to meet in a prosecution. And I would think that both Cy Vance and Tish James are dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's in this investigation because it involves a former president. And either one of these things would be an epic prosecution. And it appears they're also joining forces. So this is just a huge development in the investigation of Donald Trump.
Andrew Weissman told us that the Attorney General is under no obligation to make this public statement and under no obligation to communicate this to Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyers. So your initial point about the heat that this puts on the people in this case, it seems to have been announced as a way of alerting all of the other potential witnesses or defendants in this case. This is more serious now than you thought it was yesterday.
And remember that throughout her investigation, the Trump family has essentially thumbed their nose at her. Eric Trump missed sitting for a deposition, as I recall, initially with her. She had to compel him to sit for a deposition. We know that at least one of the things she's looking at is how they value it in the state that Trump owns in Westchester County. And they haven't played ball. And I think the fact that she's going public with this suggests that she wants it to be known as a tool for pressuring them and bringing them to heel, as it were.